Larry, maybe this one's not very exciting to start with. We're going to start with it. For attic insulation, how far away can the condenser unit be located?
It depends on the system, but most of the systems we install can go up to 75 to 100 feet away. So it's really never an issue.
Great. Sarah and Wei-Tai, have you seen, how have your utilities been compared to when you had a mixed fuel home? Are you getting savings in total, even though I'm sure your electricity bill has gone up with your natural gas bill going down, or, have your monthly costs risen?
Yeah, on my very last slide there, I showed the little chart to show that my electricity costs in my first year as an electric home had been basically the same, about $900 a year, as the previous 4 years when it was $900 to $1,200 a year in gas plus electric. But that had dropped in my second year to like $250. And so definitely we could see the efficiency of the heat pump systems in reducing costs. At least that's been my personal experience.
For us, it's been roughly equal in the winter, but a little bit more in the summer. And that's just because we weren't running anything in the summer previously. We were just having our windows open and being miserable. So we're happy to pay for good night sleeps and, not being miserable.
John, we talked about the space requirements for heat pump water heaters, both the air circulation and the kind of larger tank size. Are there options for smaller homes or creative solutions for heat pump water heaters to fit into smaller spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some 15 amp models that are made in the 40-gallon and 50-gallon size. And, if it's in an inside closet and space is of a concern and you can't move it, there are also duct applications. So what that means is that if my inside closet connects to my garage, I can basically cut a hole with a duct and the heat pump water heater can connect to the ambient air in the garage and draw it in from there instead of the house. So if you're trying to save space, that is absolutely available to you. I don't know off the top of my head. I think they may be researching 30-gallon units, but going from like a 30-gallon natural gas to a 30-gallon heat pump may be difficult for you to be able to get ample hot water for your home. But they're absolutely available for you if that is your top priority.
Okay. Larry and John, one of the graphs that we saw earlier said that new sales of heat pump water heaters would have to be a certain amount or would be a certain amount in 2035. What's the useful life of the heat pump water heaters versus the gas water heaters? And same for heat pump space heating units.
Yeah, well, in our experience, water heaters, tank or tankless, when you're talking about natural gas, 10 years is the average lifespan. So even though a tankless doesn't hold water like a regular storage tank does, it can still leak because it has a small amount of water. So 10 years is the overall lifespan. When it comes to like maintenance and repairs, heat pump water heaters are still relatively new that I don't think we know what we don't know. And they haven't been around for 10 years to know if they're really going to last that long. But in our experience, repair is relatively minor, and so is maintenance. And so I think when it comes to longevity, it's definitely a good option. But overall, 10 years seems to be the average. I've heard some people getting like 25 to 30 years out of their old, Montgomery Ward natural gas water heater. I think that's the exception instead of the norm. But yeah, 10 years seems to be the average.
Actually, if I could chime in on there about replacement timeframes, because John probably knows that most of the business of switching water heaters is when somebody's water heater is leaking, right? It's like this emergency replacement, and then they don't really have time to go research switching over to a new fancy, different type of technology. And so they just replace like for like, gas for gas. And I think one conversation we want to start to have is to in order for heat pumps to be effectively moving into the marketplace, we need to proactively change it before your water heater starts leaking, right? And so when John said that your lifetime is typically 10 years, I've been telling any friends like, hey, if your water heater is 10 years old, even if it's not leaking, go ahead and replace it now. Do the planning for your electrical breaker, do the shopping, educate yourself, and go ahead and just replace it a year or 2 or 3 early, and make that change, that switch early. I think this is a very key barrier in the transition that we need to talk about. And at the same time, when John mentioned that they do the loaner program to loan you the gas heater while your thing is leaking, so that you have the time to do the permitting and so forth for the electrical. I think this is actually a huge issue that has to be addressed to get the mindset changed of when a water heater should be switched out. Not in an emergency, it should be proactive.
Yeah, and just personally with our business, that's something we absolutely recognize and agree with. And so we've started a marketing campaign to let customers know that if we have their record on file and their water heater is 6 years old or older, we're trying to communicate to them like, hey, there's never a good time for your water heater to go out. So let us come out, give you a free inspection. We can talk to you about heat pump technology, what it would take. And that way you have time to research it and we can get that ball rolling and educate you. So when the time does come, if it's leaking, we have the loaner program. If it's not leaking, we have everything else in place so we can get you the option you need.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know we're hopefully doing a heat pump water heater next month sometime to finish up our current round of electrification projects. And our hot water heater is 7 years old, but I'm already starting to notice that it's taking longer and longer to actually kind of get hot water, especially in the morning during the winter. That tap has to run for quite a long time. So it's these things, even if they're not broken, same with the heaters or furnaces, their performance decreases a lot, even though it might still heat water or heat air. And so early replacements are definitely something to think about when planning for a switch. Larry, what about the useful life difference between a gas furnace and a heat pump heating system?
Well, traditional HVAC systems mostly wear out because they're not sized properly and they turn on and off all the time. Anything that's going to shut down and start up is going to go through its most wear and tear through that process. So having a properly sized heat pump system that runs longer cycles is going to last longer. Sorry about that. It's going to last longer because it doesn't have to turn on and off all the time.
Wei-Tai and Sarah, what about power outages? Is that a concern? Do you have backup systems, have plans for backup systems? How did that factor into your decisions, if at all?
Sarah, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, we definitely have talked about it, and our long-term, it wasn't part of our decision to go away from gas, because I feel like the power outages we've had have been in the super hot summer months where I don't need a gas heater anyway. I need my electric AC or my electric heat pump, air cooling. But definitely, I think, all Californians, we want to think about having solar plus storage on our homes, and we need, incentives, tax incentives for that, hoping Congress passes some form of that in reconciliation. But, we have basically said we'll get a portable battery, and that could help us with a mobile AC, but didn't really factor into our decision to transition away from gas. I didn't feel like gas was going to help us much in those circumstances.
Yeah, for our home, I've thought about putting batteries I'm in the solar business and energy storage, but I could and know how to put a battery in, but I haven't done it yet. Partly because I've lived overseas in Asia part of my life. And in some places of the world, there's a power outage every single day. And so I've been used to, what do I do for food? I will eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't need to use my stove. Do I need to take a shower today? Well, I'll take one tomorrow. This is life in many other countries. And I don't feel in America here that I need electricity every minute of the day. Now, that's not for everybody's lifestyle. That's a personal choice. But I'm not halfway joking just to say that I don't think I need electricity all the time. But in the future, very soon, we can have our EV. I plan to have my EV power my home. And that's already like the Ford F-150 truck. They're talking about how that's a feature. And I think it's just within the next few years. So I'm not going to hang a $10,000 battery on my garage wall. I'm going to wait until I hook up my car to be my backup power.
Yeah, and I think
Can I chime in on this one real quick,
go ahead.
Emily? I'm sorry. I hope the phone doesn't ring again. The most of the time, traditional furnaces need electricity to run anyway. So without backup power, we're no worse off or different than we would be if we had that gas appliance. The heat pump water heaters, we're installing them with pressure, or excuse me, temperature balancing valves in them, so we can run up the temperature of the tank. So there's extra storage water in there. And usually like the cruise for one of those is a few days, you can still get a good amount of hot water out if you're conservative about it. So most of my customers don't feel the need to have backup at this point, and our issues aren't as bad as people say they are.
Yeah, the hot water heater during a power outage, they are a tanked water heater, so it'd be pretty similar to if your gas tank water heater went out, because that does need electricity to run too. And so you do have, and especially since a heat pump water heater in a lot of cases might be an 80-gallon tank, you might have more hot water actually to last you until that tank is empty, and they're very heavily insulated. So you'll have what's in the tank during a power outage. And I know we haven't talked much about gas stoves, but that was a question that came in as well. So again, you can light a gas stove during a power outage with like a match or a lighter, but obviously it won't light on its own. So there's still issues when it comes to power outages. It'll be something that we will all have to deal with. But the good news is that, for us, when we switch to induction, which will hopefully be any month now, we got it pre-wired during this project. If there's a power outage and I really need to cook, I will set up a camp stove. It's not really that much different than my gas stove and lighting it with a lighter, but outside so that we don't get carbon monoxide poisoning. What about, Larry, when would you choose a ducted heat pump versus a ductless heat pump system? And how often are you able to use existing ducts?
We use the existing ductwork whenever's necessary, but it needs to be sized properly, and it needs to be in good condition. And so we do a full evaluation on it. If it's been replaced in the last few years, sometimes we can go in and just kind of straighten it out and pull it tight and put dampers in so we can balance the airflow. The other part of the question is, when would I use a regular mini split system, like a wall mount or something like that? And there are applications where we do a combination. We may do the bedrooms with a ducted unit so that we don't have to put 3 systems in, and we'll do the main part of the house with 2 wall mounted units. So we do use a combination of systems depending on what the application is. But when we install a head in each room, that's a mechanical feature in each room. And over the last year and a half, prices have really come up on this. So the ducted versions that we install are generally a little less expensive. And because they're going to be smaller, they're usually a bit more efficient.
We go back to Wei-Tai and Sarah, although again, you're all always welcome to join in. Did either of you have to go through a panel upgrade or electrical upgrades in general?
My home already had a 200 amp circuit, so luckily I had enough room in my panel to do the changes.
We did not, and I credit Larry for that because we have older electricity panel, but Larry could probably speak more to why we didn't if he remembers, but we didn't need to, which actually surprised me. I think maybe if we add solar, we might need to, or if we add an EV, which we hope to, but we didn't at all, which was great.
Yeah, it is. It's very rare when one of our projects results in a panel upgrade. There's usually enough power in most panels. It's an issue of space. And we have several techniques that we can use to free up space in the panel and not exceed the actual panel electrical load with most of the products we install. So it's just about getting creative.
What about refrigerants? So since these units, both heat pump water heaters and heat pump HVAC, have compressor or condenser units, is there a concern with refrigerant leakage in the home or in terms of global warming potential of those refrigerants?
I could take that. There's been some studies that have shown that the incremental benefit of replacing your gas water heater with a heat pump water heater goes far beyond the negative side if all the refrigerant leaked out of it. So it's a net positive, even if it just works for a while. There's only a tiny bit of refrigerant in those systems, so it's really nothing to worry about. And anybody with a traditional air conditioning unit has this very large coil with a lot of refrigerant in that system. And for years in the HVAC industry, they had these coils that had problematic issues with leaking, and it's never really become a problem per se. There's a small amount of this refrigerant and a large amount of air that it gets mixed with, so it's likely not too problematic.
John, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just agree. I mean, it has such a small refrigerant amount in it that manufacturers are even like, hey, for delivery purposes, you can lay it on its side. And, you know, a lot of times with refrigerators, the rule is, well, if you lay it on its side, you need like a full day to stand up so everything can settle. It's like the old kind of rule of thumb. With these, it's like, hey, it's so big, it may be hard to deliver, lay it on its side, maybe stand it up for an hour or two, and it's fine because it has such a small amount. And you know, we've reached out to manufacturers directly to ask them about that, and there's no concerns about like leakage or anything like that within the system.
And you make a great point there, John. Everybody on this call likely has a refrigerator in their house, and if you don't, I highly recommend them if you have the means. And that refrigerator is going to have as much or more refrigerant in that charge than a typical heat pump water heater. If that springs a leak, it would be the same exact thing.
Yeah, I would add on, just from a greenhouse gas point of view, that regulations in the state of California are changing so that to make it more restrictive, by January 2025, the heat pumps will need to have much more climate-friendly refrigerants on the order of a global warming potential of, I think, 750 or less, as opposed to the products out there with 2,100 or 1,500. So they're all going to have to tuck under 750 by 2025. So the products that will be coming on the market at that time will be a different refrigerant that will be less damaging to the environment.
Great. Well, we really thank all four of you for your expertise and experience. We are going to go into our 10-minute break. We did not get to all the questions, although we got a good chunk of them. So I would love it if the panelists could, just take a few minutes and maybe go into that Q&A and try and fill out the ones that we didn't get to yet. And for everyone else, we will see you back at 10:45.